Dark Souls 2.
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 Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2.
Welcome to Dark Souls 2, a so-called bad video game.
Every time I hear someone who isn't crazy defend Dark Souls 2, they say combat is more deliberate. They choose the word deliberate rather than slow. This is because the enemies are very slow, and so is the player, so every single move matters. Dark Souls 2 is slow.
Healing in this game takes way too long. This game is generally faster paced than Dark Souls 1.
If playing Dark Souls 1 and 3 is like going through a swimming pool, swimming through it, Dark Souls 2 is like going through a swimming pool, but of custard. It's so slow. So slow.
Some of the bosses aren't that good, and one is considered to be the worst in the series by many.
A lot of the bosses are fine. Just fine. Whenever I replay Dark Souls 2, I find myself remembering bosses that I straight up forgot. Oh yeah, Fat Dragon Slayer guy, or Quelaag again, or Ornstein again.
Oh, I like that mechanics. Certain set pieces during the game as well just have this ambiance to them that fuels the battle like no other Souls game before or after it. A prime example of this being the Looking Glass Knight boss, and the way the rain pitter-patters around you while you're locked in battle, lightning flashes around the arena and onto his sword, which he uses as an actual attack. I mean, come on! Even the way the adze bust out of his shield. Honestly, this boss was my favorite fight in the entire game.
This game is unfairly maligned. I think Dark Souls 1 was incredible, and people who really liked that one had kind of unrealistic expectations and got inevitably burned by the sequel being different or failing to be as spectacular and new as its predecessor when it came out. Judging it as a game, I think it's really good. But it's a little bit better than Dark Souls 1. Oh, I mean, fuck you! I used bonfire ascetics to kill the rotten 4 times and skip 3/4 of the main fucking game! See you in shit, Dark Souls! Also, not only could Dark Souls have easily been less linear if it wanted to, the game fucking contrives itself to ensure that it isn't with needless bullshit. Nice try, idiot. Impassable magic fog. Well, fuck you! We put some fucking mist here because we arbitrarily decided you don't get to do this stuff, you gotta do the other things first. Do you want to see what Nito's up to? Tune in next time when go fuck yourself!
I still want to sing Dark Souls 2's praises while I can, because no one else can, or at least when they do, they praise the game and also insult Dark Souls 1 in a bunch of nonsensical ways.
I really like Dark Souls 2. Okay, I understand that liking Dark Souls 2 isn't exactly the most controversial thing in the world, but I believe it needs to be said that Dark Souls 2 is underrated.
The community as a whole believes Dark Souls 2 to be the worst of the Souls games.
I'm not kidding, by the way. If you want to hear my reasons why I like this game, I explain myself here at the timestamp, so skip there if you want to. Explain myself, I said. Like it's a crime to like Dark Souls 2.
Why do people think Dark Souls 2 is so bad?
It will always be known as the black sheep of the Dark Souls trilogy.
Loved by a select few and loathed by many.
After all of this, you should have a really clear understanding of why Dark Souls 2 doesn't get the same wide praise and love as its siblings do. Dark Souls never rubbed it in your face that the game was going to be hard on you.
There's simply not enough stamina in this game. Upgrading endurance doesn't give you much stamina, and certain things seem to cost way too much. So you're not going to be dodging much.
Walking around an attack. Essentially, what this is a dodge, which you regain stamina on. You reposition, you take no damage, but you also regen stamina. It is insanely efficient.
I don't know about you guys, but something about being able to slash 2 weapons at the same time for double the damage, whew, it's wildly satisfying.
This game also introduced power stancing. Thank you very much, Dark Souls 2.
Power stancing does not add this crazy, unique variety that you think.
Regardless of your personal feelings on it, it is objectively not as well done as those games.
The quality of life in this game surprised me. You know, fast travel is available from the get-go. Makes it a lot more motivating to go exploring, because I know if I find a bonfire, I can just go back to where I came from. Dark Souls 1, you had to beat Ornstein and Smo first, and even then it wasn't the best because there were so few bonfires. Having to upgrade my weapons became such a boring and tedious process.
It's objectively not as well done as those games.
I think a lot of the areas that you travel to in Dark Souls 2 are really amazing. Some of the ones that stick out to me the most, again, are Iron Keep. I really like Iron Keep.
This area is pure cancer. There are so many enemies placed on these these narrow-ass platforms you gotta get across. All the while, these pieces of garbage shoot you with a bunch of arrows, even if you're able to dispatch everyone properly, which admittedly can be done with a lot of patience. You're only given a singular attempt at the area boss, Smelter Demon. If you die to him, you gotta do all that bullshit all over again.
Are you supposed to clear Iron Keep or just run past everything? I genuinely couldn't tell.
This area, the enemies are placed quite well in this area. The enemy placement here feels good, and it's a good challenge to get through this area and find the way through. But it's not too challenging.
The enemies and where they're placed in Dark Souls 2 is just objectively god awful.
Some of the enemy placement in Dark Souls 2 isn't awful. The game does pay attention to where things go and when.
Dark Souls 2 really suffers from a quantity over quality problem. The main problem with this bloated amount of content is the fact that it's significantly less polished. It's a little more repetitive, and it overstays its welcome after a little while.
In terms of content, at least for the Scholar of the First Sin edition, there's a lot to do here, and plenty of optional content to keep you occupied on top of 3 separate DLCs. That's more DLCs than any other Souls game has ever received.
I don't want to throw more fuel on the bonfire of hate that is Dark Souls 2 video essays, but I really don't like this game. I will outline every single thing that Dark Souls 2 does that is mechanically interesting or good in the boss design and level design. Actually, I lied. We'll start this critique off with the negative. The tutorial is bland.
We absolutely love it.
Dark Souls 2 is actually one of my more favorite Souls games, so it is understandably pretty upsetting to me to see this game being trashed on so often.
I dislike this game more than any other game I've played in recent memory.
Dark Souls 2 is not just straight up a bad game. Like, it's just not. And I really enjoyed my time playing it. But the rest of the games are better.
Another thing that I love about Dark Souls 2 is actually its art and environment design, which I consider to be among the strongest in the series. While I recorded just some of the opening areas, I came across so many really pretty spots throughout my quick romp through them. Combine this with not only just the attention of detail in these areas, but also the sheer visual variety of them. In 3 areas back to back to back, I was in a forest, then a series of castle-like ruins suspended over the ocean, and then moving through underground dungeons approaching a large expansive cavern with a crashed pirate ship. I mean, come on.
Each of the areas, like their bosses, are vibrant and shapely. Even the most rigid area designs are pleasing to look at.
I really dislike the areas in Dark Souls 2.
But I feel like I'm on vacation. This is too nice. Dark Souls 2 didn't really look like a depressing, hopeless game.
Yeah, I know the point of Dark Souls is to be like depressing and emo, but while the Chosen Undead might listen to Linkin Park on repeat, it doesn't mean they can't enjoy a very beautiful world.
The world design in Dark Souls 2 just makes no sense. You see that tower up there? What do you think is up there? Take a guess. Iron Keep!
And yet, going into the world, there's always going to be that one comment was like, oh, look, how can you go up this elevator here on a tower with like no elevator on the top and then come out underneath a lava castle? It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I don't care.
It gets even more confusing because Dark Souls 2 has an original edition and then Scholar of the First Sin.
I like Dark Souls 2, people. I like it a lot. I may even love it. It's my next favorite after Elden Ring.
Where I got this special launch day edition of this game with this cool steel cover case. Little did I know that was about to be the best part of Dark Souls 2.
I know this game can suck sometimes. But guess what? So can the rest of them. Some people like to act like the other Soulsborne games are fucking perfect.
Adaptability. The main reason you upgrade this stat is to get more iframes for your dodge rolls. So you start the game with a very tiny window that you are actually invulnerable in the middle of your dodge. And it's way too small. It completely destroys your confidence that you built up from playing Dark Souls 1.
Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of dumb shit they put in here. ADP stat, everyone's already talked about this. But also, I'm dodging just fine. For the most part. Dodged. Dodged. Dodging fine. Dodging fine.
If I had to describe Dark Souls 2 with one picture, it'd be this. Dark Souls 2. Its main definition of hard is throwing as many enemies that the boundaries of this world can conceivably maintain into one area.
The difficulty in DS2 is mostly artificially placed and manipulated so they can say, hey, look how hard Dark Souls is. Isn't Dark Souls such a hard game? Yo, man, this Dark Souls game sure is hard.
I heard long before I ever played Dark Souls 2 that the biggest problem with this game is the amount of enemies, and the enemy placement in Dark Souls 2 is awful and unplayable and shit. I was worried for no reason though, because whatever everyone's been complaining about in this game just genuinely did not bother me that much.
It's a bad game.
I hated every moment of Dark Souls 2 combat, and I completely blame the game for this.
You're gonna gonna smash that boss to pieces, so why complain about some of the few challenging parts of the game?
I think my tier list is a fair representation of all the bosses in Dark Souls 2.
This game actually went through quite a troubled development process. Due to a number of factors, we were actually forced to rethink the entire game midway into development.
I just really like it.
Young Hollow, there are but two paths. Inherit the order of this world, or destroy it. But the question remains, what do you want? Tell me. Light, dark, or something else entirely? There is no path beyond the scope of light, beyond the reach of dark, and yet we seek it insatiably. And no matter how tender, how explicit, the lie will remain a lie.
I absolutely despise Dark Souls 2.